Welcome to episode 95 of Anchored in Education. I'm E. Scott England, and Anchored in Education is the podcast dedicated to all things education. Educators across the world routinely engage in conversations surrounding fundamentals, concepts, and new ideas that improve this great profession. Sometimes we agree, other times we disagree. But at the end of the day, we are all anchored in education. I am certain we have all received bad news at some point in our lives. Or what about this? Have you ever been impacted by a physical ailment? Do you think it's the end of the world? I know it sounds dramatic, but I can remember times when things happened to me that had me asking questions like, why me? Now, for a second, I want to imagine that you are an accomplished piano player. You've taken lessons since you were 5 or 6 years old. It was an integral part of your life growing up, so much so that you majored in it when you went to college. After college, you took your incredible skill and talent with you to the classroom to impart knowledge upon students. Then, one night, an event would absolutely rock your world. You go from perfectly fine at night to waking up finding yourself in the hospital. You learn that you are going to need an operation to remove a tumor on your brain. And after surgery, deemed a success because the cancerous tumor was removed, you awake to find you've lost the ability to move the right side of your body and you've lost the ability to speak. If you ever want to walk or speak again, you will have to work harder than ever before. But playing the piano might not happen again. This is exactly what happened to my guest today, Amy Effler. Amy is currently an elementary music teacher in Easton, Maryland, and a doctoral student at UMES. She was in the first class I ever taught here at UMES, and she has an incredible story. I hope you listened to last week's episode with Dr. Jodie Eckleberry-Hunt because this is a story of grit, growth, hope, and healing. I knew the minute Amy shared it that I wanted to ask her to join me on the podcast. This story is beyond incredible, and she's here to share it with us today. Amy, welcome to Anchored in Education.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm excited, and I hope that I have built this up in the opening for listeners to be excited as well and wanting to hear more. And, what I say is just settle in for what I think is truly a remarkable story, and we're going to get to that. But before we do, we'd like to find out a little bit more about you and how you became anchored in education.
Mm-hmm. All my happy childhood memories are anchored in not education, but music.
Okay.
My sisters and I started taking piano lessons at a very young age, about first grade, kindergarten. Wow. We learned to actually read music by church hymns.
Okay.
We take turns singing melody and the alto part and the tenor part. And we just learned to love hymns. Raina would sing melody and I would sing harmony for verse 1 and then switch it up for verse 2. I know now, after reading what music does for the brain, that this practice shaped me into my being in more ways than one. I still love hymns. Later on, when I was a teenager, I played those same hymns for the congregation to sing to. Like so many young musicians, I went to college wanting to play, not teach music.
Right.
My mom was the one that talked me into tacking an education degree onto my music degree, and I ended up majoring in music education, specializing in piano.
And if I recall, your mom said that, you wanted to be like a classical pianist or a concert pianist. And your mom's like, Amy, there's there's like 5 of those in the world. I don't know if it was 5, but that's what led to the tacking on the education, right?
I'm good, but not that good. When I went to college, I absolutely revered my piano teacher. Dr. DeSalvo was her name. I wanted to be exactly like her. She had this like quiet sweetness about her until she sat down at the piano. That is when her true being shined through. Fierce, strong, confident, and like, don't mess with Dr. DeSalvo. She didn't even need to say anything to earn respect. I basically followed her around for 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah. My senior year, I was given the opportunity to graduate with honors. The requirement said I had to write a capstone project paper, but a project that I had to devise and implement. And I agreed because Dr. DeSalvo told me to. And I ended up loving research, especially like a dusty old piano pedagogy book. And that's why I fell in love with teaching. Not only privately, but like group teaching, especially piano, but all music. And I graduated with honors from Westminster College with a music education degree, specializing in piano in 2010.
All right. And right now you are an elementary music teacher. Is that correct? What grades do you span?
I teach pre-K through 5.
And this is the first year you've taught elementary, right?
Well, I did part-time elementary last year and part-time middle and high school.
And we shared a little bit before we started this. It's an experience, isn't it?
Yes, especially the week before Christmas. They're so excited.
Shout out to elementary teachers. Absolutely. Now, you've spoken about how in college you had to overcome anxiety of performing in front of people. And I think that's important, especially since, now you're up in front of children every day, but you had like ultimate anxiety of performing. And so can we take a moment for you to walk listeners through this story of the ultimate stage fright and how you conquered that?
Well, I wouldn't say I conquered it. I learned to live with it and work with it. My first semester as an undergrad, I really hadn't had a real recital yet. Like, yes, I played in church. Yes, I played the trumpet in the band, but I wasn't nervous because I didn't feel like I was being judged. My first college recital, I was bigger than my boots and tried to learn Beethoven's third movement of the Moonlight Sonata. That is a beast of a piece. And I actually got pretty good at it. Beethoven would still be embarrassed that I played it. But when the moment came, like, I walked out on the stage into the spotlight, and 50 people were probably in the audience, but it looked like a full sold out show at the Carnegie Hall. And my hands started sweating and my knees were shaking. And I sat down at the piano. We had to memorize our music, and I couldn't even begin.
Not even one keystroke.
Nope, I froze up. And so Dr. DeSalvo had my music backstage, and I had to use the music, which is to a piano player embarrassing. And like I said before, Beethoven would be ashamed.
So once you got the music, did you play?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then how did you take that experience? And like you said, I said conquered, you said you haven't conquered, but you've learned to manage.
Yeah. I still get very nervous when I have to play in front of people. I have to do that less often these days, but it helps me immensely if I pretend that I'm teaching the students. Like, um, if I pretend like I'm demonstrating how to play it properly.
Okay. All right. All right. So
Mhm.
I want to jump to 2016 because at some point in 2016 your life took a major turn. You were diagnosed with brain cancer, and you underwent treatments to address this, but in the treatment process led to complete paralysis on the right side of your body. And with that, I mean, for the listeners, so they know, it came with you lost your speech, you lost the inability to walk, and you lost, of course, the inability to play piano. Something that you've said you've done since you were 6 years old. So, can you describe what your thought process was when your world was turned upside down?
Mhm. I actually thought I was dreaming on and off for like several, 3, 4 months. I was incredibly blessed to have this awful, horrible thing happen the way that it did. I was in the peak of my physical fitness. I ran 5 miles a day. I ate healthy. I was hydrated, and in short, I was very passionate about my physical fitness, and still am. But one night, at about 2 o'clock a.m., I had a seizure out of nowhere, and luckily, it woke up my husband and knocked me unconscious. My husband called 911. And the Easton Memorial Hospital was about a mile from our apartment. So I was able to get there in the matter of minutes. And Dr. Khalid Kurtam was the neurosurgeon there, and he was able to remove the tumor within 24 hours.
Wow.
Not a lot of people who have brain tumors can say that. The tumor was pressing on my motor cortex, which explained the seizure and loss of movement on my right side. Even though Dr. Kurtam miraculously removed the entire tumor, it came back from testing as cancerous. So I still had to undergo chemotherapy and radiation. I had to do 1 year of chemo and 33 radiation treatments. I had so much support from my friends, family, and professionals, therapists who later on became friends. So now you asked about how I coped with the loss of music. Before gaining full consciousness following the surgery, I heard music playing in my hospital bed. I was in absolutely no pain and happy from the drugs. And so I tried singing. That's when I realized I couldn't talk.
Oh.
It was the scariest moment of my life, probably. I fortunately took vocal pedagogy in college, and I learned there that the first step in vocal production is humming. And it's hard to describe, but I felt this is before I even opened my eyes.
Yeah.
I felt a presence that was familiar. I knew it was one of my parents or my husband, Chris. So I thought to myself, they must be super worried about me. And that's when I discovered I could hum.
Okay.
So the song was Otis Redding's "Sitting by the Dock of the Bay."
Yeah.
And I gave it my full effort. And on the whistling part,
Uh-huh.
I hummed that. And I hope I don't burst out crying.
No, take your time.
It was my mom, and she burst out crying in relief.
Yeah. And so the sitting on the dock of the bay, that was what was playing on the hospital sound.
My dad brought in a Bluetooth to hook his phone up to.
Because,
Me and my dad have exactly the same music taste.
and they knew how powerful music was to your life to start playing that. And so what does sitting on the dock of the bay have a stronger significance to you
Yes.
nowadays?
Yes, I think about that moment every time I hear that song.
Yes.
And I usually start crying.
Yes. Now, so
In a good way.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. I've got I believe a tear in my eye just listening to it, and I mean, if listeners do too, I say grab the Kleenex, because we're going to move on to a part of your story that when I first heard it, I mean, I wasn't even involved, and I was absolutely crushed to hear this. But the part of the story that you told me that has resonated with me so much is how professionals first acted around you when you were going through your physical therapy, because you've lost your speech, and so you struggled to communicate with them. And so this led to individuals to talk louder and slower to you. And, would you mind sharing this story to listeners, and what advice you would give others so they can potentially avoid making this same mistake?
Don't get me wrong, 99% of my therapists were great, like unbelievable human beings. Victoria Belowski was my first speech therapist at my first rehab center in Easton. Not only did she teach me that speech problems were caused by traumatic brain injuries were remedied mostly by brain memory training, she also treated me as an equal partner in our shared mission of recovering my speech. She explained her vast knowledge of what the brain has to do in order to get me to speak. Okay. She wasn't afraid to use scientific terms because she did her research and she knew that I was an educated woman. Sure, there was a lot of therapists who thought they had to talk louder and slower to me. One even asked me if I was a college graduate. This is after I had earned my master's degree. Another therapist screamed so loudly in my ear that it was ringing afterwards.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you as a educator come across a nonverbal student, don't assume that they aren't intelligent and they're hard of hearing. They just can't talk.
Yes. And it's a I'm glad, first of all, that you did clarify that 99% were amazing to work with. And it sounds like the individual you described that treated you like a partner and used the scientific, I love hearing that. But it is a good reminder that just because there's nonverbal doesn't mean that that they don't have the intelligence. And I think when you first told me the story, my favorite part is when you said, and now you're in a doctoral program, and it won't be long before you're walking across that stage being hooded as Dr. Effler. And I'm excited for that day, and I know you are as well. Now, it took time, and it took a lot of hard work, but you've regained the ability to walk and talk again. I mean, here you are. We're telling your story. So many times in life, we're met with adversity, and it seems we will never get past it. And so through the course of your treatments and your physical therapy, how did your thoughts shift and shape to keep you focused on overcoming?
Since the traumatic event happened, my mantra has been, "This too shall pass," and other variations of that same meaning. Basically, this isn't forever. I didn't give up because I couldn't. Okay. In order for hardships to pass, there has to be temporary discomfort, but it's just that, temporary. Some version of temporary are longer than others, but if I just sat on my butt refusing to do my therapy, as degrading it was sometimes, I would probably still be on that wheelchair. Well, like, not talking, like, just prolonging the temporary.
Wow. Yeah. And so before we go, as if this hasn't been inspirational up to this point, I think maybe one of the most inspirational parts of your ongoing story, and I like that because it is ongoing. You are still an accomplished pianist, and you do this by playing left-hand pieces only. And can you share a little bit? And I believe we're going to hear a little sample as well to share with listeners. But can you share with us when you made the determination not to let this setback impact your accomplishments in piano playing?
First of all, I want to say I'm an accomplished pianist. I'm a hobby pianist nowadays.
I mean, I guess it depends on perspective, because I have a piano in my house and I'm nowhere near accomplished. I am accomplished at stacking stuff on it and looking at it. So, and I have heard you play. I stand by accomplished.
Thank you. Basically, if music is in your heart and soul, it comes seeping through in one way or another. Instead of missing the piano, the pain of missing piano, it was much less painful to play with one hand. I could go on and on about the nuances of left-hand piano, the technical aspects of it, like the thumb and the forefinger play the melody, and fingers 3 through 5 play the accompaniment, much like two-hand piano. Okay. But that would be a whole other podcast episode. So let's just keep it at this. Music always finds a way.
And it does. And you had shared, because until I met you and until I had the opportunity to witness some of your playing left-hand pieces have a history. Mm-hmm. Can you share a little on the history of left-handed pieces? Because I'm sure if listeners are like me, and unless they have the same musical background, they probably are not realizing that there's these pieces exist out here. And mm-hmm. for a reason.
Mm-hmm. I didn't do research on this. I can't say any composers' names.
Sure.
But I know that Liszt thought he had a weak left hand, so he composed pieces to exercise his left hand, like Hungary's God.
Okay.
And the detail you're probably getting at is in the Civil War, people played the piano for entertainment because obviously there was no Netflix or TikTok.
Yeah.
And they played the piano for entertainment. And there was obviously amputations because it was the Civil War.
Sure.
And that's how left-hand piano gained a vaster repertoire.
And it is incredible. They're beautiful pieces. We're going to listen to a sampling of that. And Amy, I just want to thank you for taking time out of your day, but also for sharing this story, because I know it's personal to you, but at the same time, the perseverance and the resilience that you have shown and continue to show it's an incredible story. So thank you for joining us on Anchored in Education today.
Thank you for sharing my story.
That beautiful music was Amy playing a left-handed piece, recorded specially for Anchored in Education. Now you can read more about Amy as well as find links to a great article she has shared on the history of left-handed piano pieces by visiting my website, escottengland.com, and click on the podcast tab at the top. Don't forget, I'm going to remind you again, if you have not subscribed to Anchored in Education, please do so on whatever platform you get your podcasts. Now, I've had bad days, bad weeks, bad months. You name it, I'm sure. We've all been there. I've also been delivered bad news. This bad news has ranged from receiving a bad grade when I thought I did a great job to receiving the news my father had suddenly passed away. Avoiding bad news is impossible. Choosing how we navigate our next steps, though, is completely up to us. Amy's story puts in perspective times when I've received bad news that I deemed was the end of the world. Clearly overdramatic, but I'm sure I'm not the only one who has been there. I am inspired by the path Amy has chosen. I am inspired by the things she continues to accomplish. It reminds me of another story I've recently read. Ron Infantino was on Eastern Airlines Flight 401 that crashed in the Florida Everglades in 1973. He was one of only 75 who survived. Infantino uses that crash to put things into perspective when things seem to be going badly. Infantino says, quote, "I number things from 1 to 10, with 10 being in a plane crash. So when I'm stuck in traffic, I say, Ron, what number is this? It's not a 10, end quote. I'm sure it is easier said than done, especially when you are the one to experience the traumatic event. But it is still a good reminder of how strong and capable we all are, even when we don't immediately recognize it. And remember, at the end of the day, we are all anchored in education.